The first time I saw her, her mother grabbed my wrist like we were already connected. I was sitting alone in a warm booth trying to enjoy one quiet cup of tea when this older woman slid into the seat across from me and whispered, "Young man, I need you to do something crazy." I blinked at her, thinking maybe I misheard. Her eyes were kind but desperate, like she had been holding her breath for too long. She leaned closer, voice low. "Pretend to be my daughter's fiancé, just for tonight." My heart jumped. I stared at her hand on my wrist, then at her face. I should have pulled back. I should have laughed. But something in her expression made my throat go tight. I swallowed and asked the first thing that popped into my head, half joking and half terrified. "Do I have to kiss her?" Her lips pressed together like she was trying not to smile. "Only if you want to survive the questions," she said. Then she glanced over her shoulder toward a large family table across the restaurant, and the worry came back to her face. "Please, they won't stop. She's drowning over there." Quote. That was the moment my quiet day took a sharp turn. My name is Jack Turner. I'm 28, and I live in Boston. The city never shuts up. You hear horns, trains, people shouting into phones, footsteps rushing past you like everyone is late for something important. But my life is small inside all that noise. I work as a delivery driver and warehouse assistant for a shipping company. Most days I'm in a beat-up van, hauling boxes through narrow streets and pulling into loading docks behind glass towers that I'll never step into as anything more than a guy with a clipboard. At night I go back to my studio apartment in the South End. It's cramped. The paint is peeling near the window, and the heater makes a sad rattling sound. I shower, brew black tea, turn on the soft yellow lamp by my bed, and call my mom in the suburbs. She's the steady part of my life. She asks if I'm eating enough, if I'm sleeping, if I've met anyone yet. I always say I'm fine. Then I hang up and sit there with my tea, listening to the city through the thin walls, wondering what it would feel like to have someone next to me, someone who cared how my day went. Someone who made the room feel less empty. That afternoon, I had a day off after a brutal week. The cold in Boston had teeth, the kind that bites through your jacket and makes your breath turn into a white cloud. The wind ran down the streets like it owned them. I didn't want to eat junk and stare at my phone in my apartment. I wanted something better, even if it was small. That's how I ended up at a place called Lighthouse on Beacon Street. It was cozy, old, and warm, in a way my apartment wasn't. White-painted doors, thick windows, brass lamps glowing like little suns. The air smelled like fresh bread and herbs. It felt like stepping out of the city and into a calmer world. I picked a table by the window so I could watch people hurry past outside, bundled up like walking piles of winter coats. The server brought me a pot of Earl Grey and 2 croissants. The tea smelled bright and clean, and the croissants were golden and flaky, the kind you can hear when you break them. I poured a cup, took my first sip, and felt my shoulders drop for the first time in days. That's when I noticed the family across the room. They had a long table, maybe a dozen people. Older folks with silver hair, middle-aged couples dressed like they were going to a fancy event, a few kids fidgeting and swinging their feet. Plates clinked. Laughter popped up and then faded. It looked like a big celebration, but something felt off. In the center of it all sat a woman in a simple black dress. She was tall, with pale skin and long brown hair that fell over her shoulders in soft waves. She had this calm, put-together look that made her stand out, but her hands were clasped tight in her lap like she was bracing for impact. Her smile came and went, never fully landing. Her eyes kept drifting away from the table like she was somewhere else. I heard someone call her Clara. I tried not to stare, but the tension around her pulled my attention like a hook. Voices carried in the restaurant. A sharp, older voice cut through the chatter. "Clara, at your age, still no husband? Who's going to take care of you?" Another voice, younger, with a sweet tone that didn't feel sweet at all, chimed in. "She's married to work. Guess you'll have to settle for a younger guy, huh?" There were small laughs, the kind people make when they don't want to look cruel, but don't want to stand up either. Clara's face stayed controlled. She lowered her eyes and nodded like she was used to swallowing things that hurt. Something in my chest tightened. I knew that feeling. Being alone while surrounded by people who were supposed to love you. Being judged with a smile. I looked back down at my tea, told myself it wasn't my business, but I kept glancing over. Clara's shoulders stayed stiff. Her jaw stayed tight. She didn't fight back. She just endured. Then the older woman stood up from that table. She moved with purpose, like she had already decided something. She walked straight toward me, glancing around as if she didn't want anyone to notice. Before I could even stand, she slid into the booth across from mine. Up close, she looked like someone's mother, late 60s, soft eyes, tired face, but the kind of tired that comes from loving too hard. She reached across the table and rested her hand on my wrist like she needed to anchor herself. "Young man," she whispered, "could you help me?" I was so stunned I almost laughed. "Help you how?" Her eyes shined like she was holding back tears. "Pretend to be my daughter, Clara's fiancé. Sit with her. Hold her hand. Make them stop pressuring her for one night." I stared at her. My brain screamed that this was insane. I didn't even know their last name. I didn't know Clara's job. I didn't know what kind of family I'd be walking into. But then I looked past the woman's shoulder and saw Clara again. The forced smile. The tired eyes. The way she kept her hands locked together like she was trying not to shake. The older woman squeezed my wrist gently like a quiet plea. "Please." My mouth went dry. I could have said no. I could have gone back to my tea, my quiet life, my safe little bubble. Instead, I heard myself ask, "Do I have to kiss her?" The woman's face softened with relief. "Only if you feel like it," she whispered. "But if you can just be kind, that's enough." She stood, and I stood with her, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it could shake my ribs loose. The restaurant suddenly felt smaller, warmer, like the air was watching us. The woman gestured toward the family table, and I took one step forward. That's when Clara looked up. Her eyes met mine, and for a second, the room went silent in my head. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just stared, like she was trying to figure out if I was about to save her or embarrass her. And I realized I had no idea what I was stepping into, but it was already too late to turn back. Clara's mother walked ahead of me like she owned the room, and I followed her toward that long table with my stomach twisting. Every step felt louder than it should have. I could feel eyes tracking me, measuring me, judging me, before I even opened my mouth. The warmth of the restaurant suddenly felt too hot, like the air had thickened. Clara looked up again as I reached the table. Up close, she was even more striking, not because she looked perfect, but because she looked like she was trying so hard to stay calm. Her brown eyes held a mix of shock and worry, like she was bracing for the next hit. Her lips parted slightly as if she wanted to speak, but no sound came out. Her mother clapped her hands once and smiled at the family. "Everyone, this is Jack," she announced, loud enough to turn heads at nearby tables. "Clara's fiancé." The word fiancé landed like a plate hitting the floor. A man with gray hair and a sharp jaw leaned back in his chair and stared at me like I was a puzzle. A younger woman in a navy dress raised her eyebrows and smirked. A kid dropped his fork and didn't even pick it up. Clara's face went completely still. Then she turned just slightly toward her mother, and I saw it in her eyes. She hadn't agreed to this. She hadn't planned it. She was being thrown into the deep end, too. Her mother squeezed Clara's shoulder and added quickly, "They wanted to keep it private, but I couldn't let you all keep pushing her like that. Not tonight." The table erupted in noise, congratulations, questions, gasps, fake laughter, real surprise. It all hit me at once. Clara finally moved, slowly, and stood up. She looked at me like she was deciding whether to run or play along. Then she did something that made my chest tighten. She reached for my hand. Her fingers were cold when they touched mine, but her grip was steady. It was like she was saying, "You started this, now help me finish it." I stepped closer and gave her a small smile, the kind you give when you want someone to feel safe. "Hi," I said softly, like we were alone. Her eyes flicked to my face, and for a second, her guard slipped. There was fear there, but there was also relief. She leaned in just enough for only me to hear. "Thank you," she whispered. Her mother pulled out the chair beside Clara and patted it. "Sit, Jack. We're family now." Quote. I sat down, still holding Clara's hand under the table like it was the only thing keeping me from floating away. Her palm was small and tense. I could feel her thumb shaking against my skin. The gray-haired man cleared his throat. "I'm Robert," he said. "Clara's uncle. How did you two meet?" I opened my mouth, but my mind went blank. I looked at Clara, and she jumped in smoothly. "Through a friend," she said. Her voice was calm, but her fingers tightened on mine. "We didn't want to announce anything until we were sure." Robert's eyes narrowed like he didn't like that answer. "And now you're sure?" Quote. Clara's mother laughed like it was the funniest thing she'd ever heard. "They're sure. Jack's been very good to her." The younger woman in the navy dress leaned forward. "I'm Linda," she said, smiling without warmth. "Jack, what do you do?" There it was, the test. I felt heat creep up my neck. My jeans suddenly felt too plain. My hands felt rough. But Clara's fingers stayed wrapped around mine, and something in me didn't want to fail her. "I work for a shipping company," I said. "Delivery driver and warehouse work." Linda's smile stretched. "Oh." That one word was loaded. I could hear what she meant without her saying it. "Oh, so that's all you are." Clara's shoulders stiffened. I felt it in her grip, like she was already preparing to defend me, and I hated that. I didn't want her to have to fight alone, and I didn't want her to feel like she had to apologize for me. So I leaned back a little, met Linda's eyes, and kept my voice steady. "It's honest work," I said. "It pays the bills, and it keeps me moving. I like it." Linda tilted her head. "And how does that fit into Clara's life?" Clara inhaled sharply like she was about to snap. I squeezed her hand under the table, a quiet signal. "Let me handle it." "She's not a job title to me," I said. "She's a person, and I like who she is. That's what fits." The table went quiet for a beat. Even Linda blinked, like she wasn't expecting me to push back. Clara turned her head toward me, and her eyes softened. It was a small shift, but I saw it. Like a door opening an inch. The conversation moved on, but the questions kept coming. Where did I live? What did my parents do? How long had we been together? Had I met her friends? Was I planning a big wedding? They asked like they were digging for a reason to disapprove. Clara and I worked as a team without even talking about it. When I stumbled, she filled the gap. When she hesitated, I jumped in. Every time someone tried to corner her, I found a way to pull the attention away. At some point, her little nephew asked me if I liked the Red Sox, and I told him I'd once delivered a box of baseball cards to a guy who screamed so loud when he opened it that I thought someone had been hurt. The kid laughed so hard he snorted, and suddenly the table relaxed. Clara laughed too, a real laugh. Soft, surprised, like she didn't mean to let it happen. I looked at her and forgot to breathe for a second. Her laugh changed her whole face. It made her look younger, lighter, like the weight on her shoulders had slid off just for that moment. She caught me staring and quickly looked away, but her cheeks turned a faint pink. Dinner rolled on with roasted chicken, warm bread, and too many side comments about marriage. But the pressure had shifted. The family was watching me now, trying to decide if I was real. And I hated that part, but I also felt something else growing inside me. Protectiveness. Not because Clara was weak, she wasn't. But because she looked like she'd been carrying this alone for too long. Under the table, her hand never left mine. Over and over, her thumb brushed my knuckles like she was reminding herself I was still there. When dessert arrived, Clara leaned in close again, her voice barely a whisper. "You're doing better than I am," she said. "I'm just following your lead." I whispered back. Her eyes met mine, and this time the look wasn't just fear and relief. It was something warmer, something that made my chest feel too full. Then her mother stood up and clinked her glass. "I want a picture," she said brightly. The happy couple. My stomach dropped. Clara froze beside me. I could feel her breath catch. The whole table turned toward us, phones already coming out, smiles forming, waiting for proof. Clara's voice was tight when she whispered, "They're going to want us to look real." I swallowed and leaned closer, my mouth near her ear. "Tell me what you need," I whispered, "and I'll do it." She turned her face toward mine, so close I could see the tiny specks of gold in her brown eyes. Then she whispered something that made my heart slam against my ribs. "They're not the only ones watching," she said. "And if this goes wrong, it could ruin everything." When Clara said that, I felt the air change between us. The restaurant noise was still there. Forks scraping, glasses clinking, people laughing, but it all faded behind the sound of my own heartbeat. I looked around and realized she was right. It was not just her family watching us. 2 women at the next table were staring. A guy near the bar had his phone half raised like he was already recording. In a city like Boston, people notice things fast, especially something that looked like a rich family surprise. Clara's mother was already standing with her phone out, smiling like this was the best moment of her life. "Come on," she said, waving us together. "Closer. Jack, put your arm around her." I slid my arm around Clara's waist, careful at first, like I was touching something fragile. But Clara didn't flinch. She leaned into me like she was tired of standing alone. Her hair smelled faintly like vanilla and clean shampoo. I could feel her breathing steadying as she pressed against my side. "Smile like you mean it," her mother whispered, still holding her phone up. Clara's smile was small, controlled. Mine was nervous. The family behind the camera shouted things like, "Kiss her," and "Show us the ring," and my stomach dropped again. Clara's face turned slightly toward me. Her eyes asked a question she couldn't say out loud. "Are we doing this or not?" I tightened my arm around her and lowered my voice so only she could hear. "Do you want me to kiss you?" Quote. Her eyes widened for a beat, then she swallowed and gave the smallest nod. I should have thought about the fact that this was a stranger, that this was a fake story, that I was a delivery driver in an old restaurant, about to kiss a woman I had just met to protect her from her own family. But I did not think. I just moved. I leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. Her hand slid up to my chest, fingers gripping my shirt like she needed something to hold on to. When my lips touched hers, the whole room seemed to go still. It was supposed to be quick. Just enough to sell the lie. It wasn't. Clara kissed me back, soft at first, then real enough that my head went light. Her lips were warm, and for a second, I forgot the phones, the family, the cold outside. I forgot everything, except the strange feeling that this moment had weight. When we pulled away, people cheered like we had just won something. Clara's mother laughed, pleased, and snapped a few more pictures. Clara's cheeks were pink. Her eyes dropped to the table like she was trying to calm herself. I felt the same way. I kept my arm around her because taking it away felt wrong, even though my brain was screaming that I had crossed a line I could not uncross. The rest of the dinner moved fast after that. The family stopped being cruel and turned into something else. They were still nosy, but now it was a different kind of pressure. They wanted details about the proposal. They wanted dates and locations and plans. They wanted to feel like they were part of it, like they had earned the right to control it. Clara answered politely, but I could see her wearing out. Her smile kept fading. Her shoulders kept tightening. Under the table, her fingers stayed linked with mine, and I realized she was using my hand the way someone uses a railing when the stairs feel unsteady. When plates were cleared and coats started coming out, Clara's mother leaned toward me again. "Thank you," she said softly, so no one else could hear. "You saved her tonight." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Clara stood up with the others, and for a moment she looked trapped again, stuck between hugs, goodbyes, and people asking if she was finally happy now. I watched her force polite responses, watched her eyes flicker to the exit like she wanted to disappear. I started stepping away, thinking my role was done. Then Clara touched my arm. "Jack," she said quietly. I turned, and she was standing in the hallway near the front door, away from the table's noise. The lighting was softer there. The restaurant's brass lamps made her hair glow a little. She looked tired, but there was something in her expression that pulled me closer. "Are you okay?" I asked. She let out a shaky breath. "I did not think my mom would do that," she said, "but I'm glad she did. I needed it." "I'm sorry if I made it weird," I said. "The kiss. I just thought they were not going to let it go." Clara's eyes lifted to mine. "It was not weird," she said, almost too fast. Then she paused, and her voice softened. "It was just unexpected." Silence sat between us. I noticed the small details then. The faint line between her brows like she worried too much. The way she held herself like she was always on guard. The way her eyes looked sad even when she smiled. "I'm glad you were there," she said again, like she needed me to understand. I felt my throat tighten. "I'm glad too." She looked like she wanted to say something else, but then the front door opened and cold air rushed in. Her family was leaving. Someone called her name. She flinched like a reflex. Clara took out her phone and held it in one hand, hesitating. "If they do this again," she said, trying to sound casual, "I might need another performance." I tried to smile, but my voice came out quieter than I meant. "Then you should probably have my number." Her eyes met mine. For 1 second I saw a real smile, not forced, not polite, real. She handed me her phone, and I typed my number in. My hands were steady, but my chest wasn't. When I gave it back, her fingers brushed mine, and the touch lingered a second too long to be an accident. "Text me," she said. "I will," I replied. I walked out into the cold, and the wind hit my face like a slap. Boston's streets were loud again, cars hissing on wet pavement, people rushing past. But everything felt different, like the night had shifted something inside me. The next morning, my phone buzzed while I was drinking tea by my window. It was a text from Clara. "Thank you for last night." I meant what I said. I needed it. I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then I typed back, "Any time. I charge 1 croissant per appearance." Her reply came almost instantly. "Deal. Coffee this week?" My treat. I said yes before I could overthink it. We met near the Charles River a few days later, in a small cafe with big windows and the smell of cinnamon. Clara showed up in a simple sweater and jeans, hair tied back, looking like a completely different person from the woman in the black dress at Lighthouse. She looked more relaxed, more human. We walked along the river after coffee, the water dark and calm, the city skyline standing tall behind it. It was easy to talk to her. Too easy. She laughed more with me than she had with her own family. She teased me about my fiancé skills, and I teased her about how she barely blinked during interrogation questions like she was trained for it. For a while, it felt like we were just two people, not a lie, not a performance, not anything heavy. Then one evening, sitting on a bench as the sky turned orange over the water, I asked her what she did for work. Clara went quiet. She stared at the river like it had the answer. Then she took out her phone and opened an article. She turned the screen toward me with a trembling hand. The headline made my stomach drop. It was her name, her face, a picture of her in a suit, standing in a bright boardroom like she belonged there more than anyone. Boston's youngest CEO. I stared at it, then looked at her. "Clara," I said, my voice low, "why didn't you tell me?" Her eyes filled, but she didn't look away. "Because everyone sees the title first," she whispered, "and you were the first person who didn't." The cold wind brushed my face, but the real chill was inside me. A delivery driver and a CEO. And suddenly, I was terrified of what that meant. I sat there on that bench by the Charles River with my hands locked around my phone like it might burn me. The headline kept flashing in my mind. Boston's youngest CEO. The photo looked like her, but also not her. The woman in the picture looked untouchable, like she belonged in rooms I would never enter without a delivery badge on my chest. Clara watched me closely, her eyes wide and careful. "Say something," she whispered. I wanted to say it did not matter. I wanted to act like I was calm. But fear has a way of taking your voice. All I could think about was my van, my small apartment, my rough hands. I pictured her at fancy events, surrounded by people who spoke smooth and confident, people who looked like they belonged beside her. And then I pictured me showing up in my worn jacket, feeling like a mistake. "You're a CEO," I finally said, and my voice came out flat. She nodded. "Yes." "Why keep it from me?" Her throat moved like she was forcing herself not to cry. "Because the moment people know, they change. They either want something from me, or they try to compete with me, or they act like I'm not human. With you, I felt normal. I felt safe." I looked at her and saw the real Clara again, not the photo, not the headline. The woman beside me was still the one who held my hand under a table like she was trying not to fall apart. Still the one who laughed like she was surprised she still could. But the fear did not leave. It sat between us like a wall. "I don't know where I fit," I said quietly. "I'm not part of your world." Clara reached for my hand, and I let her, but my fingers stayed stiff. "Jack," she said, voice shaking, "I'm not asking you to fit into my world. I'm asking you to be in mine. The real one. The one that's just me when the day is done." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But insecurity can be louder than truth. When we said goodbye that night, her hug held on longer than it should have. She pressed her forehead to my shoulder like she was trying to stay steady. "Please don't disappear," she whispered. "I won't," I said. But on the walk home, I felt the old habit rise up inside me. The habit of running before someone could decide I was not enough. Over the next few days, I answered her texts with short replies. Then I stopped answering at all. I told myself I was giving her space. I told myself I was doing the right thing. But the truth was uglier. I was scared she would wake up and see the gap between us and regret choosing me. Work became my hiding place. I took extra shifts. I stayed late at the warehouse. I drove routes I did not need to drive just to keep my hands busy and my mind tired. At night, I went back to my studio apartment and brewed my tea like always. The yellow lamp made the walls look softer, but it did not soften the loneliness. My phone sat beside the cup, and each time it lit up, my chest tightened. Clara called twice. I did not pick up. On the third night, my phone rang again. It was a number I did not recognize. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. "Jack," a woman's voice said. "It's Margaret." Quote, "It took me a second to place her, and then it hit me. Clara's mother, the woman who had grabbed my wrist and turned my life upside down. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said. Her tone was gentle, but there was steel under it. "Clara's been hurting. She won't tell me everything, but I know enough." My throat went dry. "I didn't mean to hurt her." Margaret gave a small sigh. "You're doing it anyway. You're letting fear speak for you." I rubbed my face with my free hand. "She's a CEO. I'm a delivery driver." "You don't understand how that feels." "Oh, I understand," Margaret said. "I've watched men with big titles and bigger egos come into her life and treat her like a prize. I've watched them smile while trying to control her, and I've watched them walk away the moment they felt small next to her." Her voice softened. "You're different. You did not care about her status when you met her. You cared that she was hurting. That's rare." I swallowed hard, feeling shame crawl up my neck. Margaret continued, slow and sure. "Clara does not need someone who matches her on paper. She needs someone who sees her. That night at Lighthouse, you were the first person who made her feel protected without trying to own her." My eyes stung, and I stared at the peeling paint on my wall like it might give me answers. "She thinks you changed your mind," Margaret said, "and she's blaming herself for trusting you." That hit like a punch. Clara blaming herself. Clara thinking she was too much. I sat up straighter. "Where is she?" Margaret paused, then said, "Beacon Hill, the brownstone on Mount Vernon Street. If you're going, go now. Don't wait for the courage to feel perfect. It won't." The call ended, and my apartment felt too quiet. The tea in my cup had gone cold. I didn't think anymore. I grabbed my jacket and ran out the door. Boston at night was sharp and bright, streetlights reflecting off the sidewalk, the cold biting at my cheeks. I drove too fast, parked too close to the curb, and almost tripped on the steps as I climbed to her door. My hands shook as I pressed the buzzer. The door opened, and Clara stood there in a loose sweatshirt and sweatpants, her hair pulled back in a messy tie. Her eyes were red like she had been crying. Seeing her like that made something break inside me. She stared at me like she could not decide if I was real. "Jack," she said, and her voice cracked. "Why are you here?" I took a breath, and the words came out raw. "Because I'm an idiot. Because I got scared. I saw that article, and I panicked, like your life was a mountain, and mine was a sidewalk. I thought you'd eventually look at me and realize I don't belong." Clara blinked fast, tears gathering again. She did not step back, but she did not step closer either. I swallowed. "But I keep hearing your laugh in my head. I keep seeing your face that night at Lighthouse when you finally breathed. And I hate myself for leaving you alone again." Her lips trembled. "You said you wouldn't disappear." "I know," I said, voice shaking, "and I did anyway. I'm sorry. I'm not proud of my job, but I'm proud of the way I live. I work hard. I show up. And if you let me, I want to show up for you too." Clara's tears fell then, quiet and steady. "It hurt," she whispered, "because I thought you were the one person who wouldn't treat me like a headline." I stepped closer, careful, like I was approaching something sacred. "I don't care about the headline," I said. "I care about you. Clara on a bench by the river. Clara who laughs when she forgets to hold her guard up. Clara who squeezed my hand like she was asking me not to let go." Her breathing hitched. "Then don't let go." I didn't think this time. I wrapped my arms around her, and she melted into me like she had been holding herself up with pure will. She clung to my jacket, burying her face against my chest. The cold wind swirled behind me, but her body was warm, real, close. "I was so tired," she whispered. "Tired of being strong all the time." I kissed the top of her head and held her tighter. "You don't have to be strong with me," I said. "Just be you." She pulled back enough to look up at me. Her eyes were wet, but there was something soft in them now, something hopeful. "Come inside," she said. Inside her home, the world quieted. The lights were low. The air smelled like clean linen and tea. She led me to the couch, and for the first time since that bench by the river, I felt like I could breathe again. Clara turned to me, and her voice was small. "I don't need you to be impressive," she said. "I need you to be real." I reached for her hand, and this time my fingers did not hesitate. "Then I'm here," I said. "For real. No more pretending." Her eyes searched my face like she was making sure. Then she leaned in and kissed me, slow and sure. It wasn't for her family. It wasn't for a photo. It was for us. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. "So," she whispered, and a tiny smile appeared through the tears, "if my family asks again, do you have to kiss me?" I laughed, breath shaky, and brushed my thumb along her cheek. "I don't have to," I said, "but I want to." And in that moment, I understood something simple and strong. Love isn't about matching lives. It's about choosing each other, even when fear tries to talk you out of it. That night, Clara and I stayed on that couch until the city outside went quiet. Her hand stayed in mine the whole time, and for the first time in a long time, my heart felt like it had finally found a place to rest.